Hello, my name is Tom Feldy. It is going to be my pleasure to be with you for the next few hours. We are going to be reviewing an area of real estate principles primarily, but this program is also designed to help you pass the state examination, so it can be used in either real estate principles or for exam prep. Now, the area we're covering is rather detailed and involved, so it's going to take a lot of work on your part, particularly if you're planning to take the state exam. What we're going to be doing, however, is to go through the textbook on real estate principles. I'll follow page by page in the material. It's in outline format, so you can either watch the screen and follow your book, whichever you find most helpful. But I'll try to explain some of the information as we pass through the various chapters. Now, you've got to remember, the state exam is very broad, and to many of you, this is a whole new area of learning. You're going to have to learn a whole new vocabulary. We're going to be learning real property law terminology, financing terms, and appraising terms. So it's going to be a little difficult at times, but if you review the material and go through a battery of final examinations, if you can do well in those final exams, we feel you'll definitely pass the state examination. So let's begin with Chapter 1 on page 1. Now, Chapter 1 is dealing with real property. And many times when we think of property, we think of the item itself, our automobile or our television set, whatever it happens to be. But we want to think of property as the interest in that thing which you own. And we find in the notes, sometimes it's referred to as a bundle of rights, where it would be the right perhaps to possess something, to sell it, to give it away, distribute it any which way you want. And that is the overall definition, we might say, of property. Now, when we're talking about the interest you have in land, we're going to use the term estate. Now, we think of an estate sometimes as the magnificent piece of land or something, but in our terminology, our term estate merely means some interest in the land, right? Now, we break down estates into two categories based on the duration. It's a terminology that we very seldom hear or use in real estate practice, but we must be aware of it for the state exam. And the distinction of estates we're looking at will be what we call freehold estates and less than freehold. Now, a freehold estate is described as one that endures for a period of time that is not fixed or ascertained by a specific limit of time. Now, that is rather a very vague definition, so I think it's better if we think of a freehold estate is that you own the property. You're an owner of some sort, okay? The idea comes from early English common law. If you were a free person, you could own property. If not, you were not able to own as a free man. You were a servant, something of that nature. All right. So a freehold estate we find is that you're the owner. That's the key point. All right. Now, we find that there are two types of freehold estates. There's number one, the fee or fee simple, and the second type is what we call a life estate. Now, a fee or fee simple, that's the greatest interest a person can have. It's the typical type of ownership you have. If you own property today, you probably have what we would call a fee estate. Okay? Now, the distinguishing feature is that it is of indefinite duration, it is freely transferable, and you can dispose of it after lifetime, pass it on with a will or something of that nature. So most of your ownership today we'll find is what we call a fee or fee simple. Now, in that break category of ownership, there is a breakdown. We have what we call a fee simple absolute and a fee simple defeasible. Now, fee simple absolute is we say you own the property without any qualifications. It's your property. You can do with it as you wish. Now, let's face it, the city is going to dictate building codes and zoning laws of that nature, but as far as you're concerned, it is your property to do with as you wish within the area of law. Okay? Now, the other type we don't find too often, but it's called a fee simple defeasible. Defeasible. And the word to keep in mind, it's a defeatable estate. Defeatable estate. So it's fee simple, defeasible, we refer to as a defeatable estate. So if you'll notice now, it indicates there it is one subject to special conditions or limitations, and if these conditions are breached or broken, then the owner can actually lose the property. Now, I recently purchased a property And at the time, of course, we made the offer and went into escrow on it. Nothing was said about some of the deed restrictions. But after escrow opened, we had what we call a title search made to see if there's anything against the property, outstanding loans or judgments, or if the title was clear. And sure enough, they dug up an old deed restriction that had been put in the deed back in 1923. And when the developer of that property in that area had originally subdivided and sold off lots, they put a restriction in the deed, which is very common today, and it says you cannot sell alcoholic beverages from this location, and if you ever do, you can lose the title. Okay? Now that restriction was put in the deed way back in 23, but it still applies today. Now I doubt if the original developer is still alive, but if the family or heirs are still alive and we were to break that condition in the deed, then technically they could take us to court and we could lose the property. So these are seldom found today, but occasionally you run across what we call a condition placed in a deed, and it says, don't do this, and if you do, we'll take the property or title away from you. And if you were to own property in that manner, we'd say you have a fee simple, defeasible estate. Okay? Now, the other type, as we mentioned in the freehold, is the life estate. Okay? Now that is one that is limited in duration to the life of a person, the owner, or the life or lives of one or more designated persons. Now let's look at the example here. Let's say A owns the property. Okay? Now A deeds the property to B, but the deed says, B, it is yours till you die, or it's your property while you're alive. When you die, we'll find out what's going to happen in a bit here, but the point is, B is the owner. How long? Till they die. Life estate. Okay? So this is not too often found, but it's what we're looking at, the life estate. Now the thing to remember, B is the owner. Okay? B can sell the property. Would you like to buy the property from B? If you did, what would you get? But B's got the life estate. So if you purchased the property from B, you would own it until B died. But keep in mind that B is the owner. So B can sell the property, B can lease the property. We see a question dealing with that where B signs a lease for 5 years. And then about 2 years down the road, B dies. What happens to the lease? It's canceled. Now, if you purchased from B, you'd be in the same position. You lose, you're only getting what B has, and in this instance, a life estate. All right, let's look at another example of the life estate. And that is, say, where A deeds to B, B is the owner now, but it says, B, it is your property until C dies. So we're basing it on a third party. Okay? So it still remains in that B is the life estate. C has no interest, no estate here at all. It's merely the estate is based on the life of C. Okay? Now, you might ask then, well, what's going to happen when C dies? And it's one of two things could happen here. We could have it set up, and it's all up to A, who originally deeded the property to B, if... Uh-oh, we missed here. All right, let's take a look here at our second example. I'll come back to this one in just a moment. Let's say A deeds to B for the life of C. Now, if A said in the deed, B, it is yours until C dies, and when C dies, I get it back, then A eventually is going to own the property again. And A definitely has an estate, an interest in that property. In other words, when it comes back, eventually I will be the owner again. Now that is a future